Am I muted? Can everybody hear me? Okay. So we're going to continue on our discussion on taharat and a few things that we have to speak about. Inshallah. So when a person makes wudu, and you guys go in the gym area and play, not here. All three of you guys go. Go to the gym area, guys. So when a person makes taharat and they make wudu, few things that don't break wudu, and they're important to just kind of go over them. So number one, last class we were discussing blood, and that was near the end of the class, and I want to repeat what that masala was. So the question was, is at what stage does blood break wudu? There's actually a stage when blood actually, when it's bleeding and where the wound is coming up, as long as it does not come upon any other portion of the skin other than the wound, it does not break wudu. So if it's just bubbling up, you still have wudu till the point where you either touch it or it flows away or it comes a little more, then wudu is now broken. So that's why it's important. Any sort of blood from any part of the body, if it's coming up, it does not come out of the wound itself, but it's just bubbling up till the level of the wound. As soon as it comes even a little bit away from the wound, now the wudu is broken. Secondly, there's also scabs. For example, there's a wound and you leave it alone and it's drying up and the blood dries. When the blood dries and it falls off, it does not break the wudu. Okay, even though that is, that's a scab is the blood. But because it is dried off, the main issue with blood is flowing blood. Not any sort of blood, right? Flowing blood is what breaks the wudu. Number three, touching of the private parts or touching a woman. This does not break the wudu. Okay. And we spoke about vomiting less than a mouthful. If a person is throwing up, they're vomiting, you will see if they can retain it in their mouth or not. If they're not able to retain it in their mouth and they're actually going more than the amount that they can suppress, then that will be considered a mouthful, Islamically considered, fiqh wise. And then if a person does smaller than that, just add all those small bits and pieces up. And then if it's due to the same reason, then that will be considered a mouthful. Also, last week, there was a discussion on sleeping and what happens in wudu while we're sleeping. So I mentioned a general rule to you guys. I'm going to explain that rule a little more now. So the general rule is that if a person is in any position, they're firmly upon the ground in such a way that there is no fear of them passing wind, then they have wudu. But if there is a possibility that they, either by leaning or swaying or drowsing off and sleeping and falling or any other scenario where they will not be firmly upon the ground, then they will lose their wudu. So for example, if a person's like, reclined, leaning against the sofa or couch and things like that, sleeping like that, and even if for a second they doze off, they will lose their wudu, even if they did not pass gas. Now, the main thing is Shariat is looking at the imkan and the possibility of a person losing their wudu. So if a person has that, then we will consider that a person that has lost their wudu, even if technically they have not passed wind. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah.
So if I sit like this,
yeah.
Firmly on the ground.
If you're firmly on the ground, meaning you are established on the ground, there is no possibility of passing wind in that position, you will not break wudu. Even if you fall asleep like that.
Even support like this.
Yes. Even with the support, even if you're reclining, but let's say you're reclining or not reclining, you're upright and you're sitting against the wall and you're sitting down. There's no possibility of passing gas in that position, in that state. Then even if you fall asleep in that state, you go drowsy or whatever, you will not break your wudu. So the rule is if there is a possibility of that person losing or passing any wind, then they will be considered as they have broken their wudu, even if they did not break their, they did not pass gas. Yes, so the question was in the blood, if a person puts a tissue or a bandage or anything on that wound and it comes upon that tissue, now you have broken the wudu because it exited from the wound. As soon as it exits from the wound, it is now broken. I could not find the videos from the last class. I will be uploading them, inshallah.
One question that you're saying.
Yes.
When you prick on the wound and the blood has not flown away from the wound. So let's say we have a small needle that prick you, but the bubble that came out is bigger than the active ball that prick you. But it's not flowing, it's sitting there.
Is there blood on the needle? So the question was, is for example, if you pricked yourself with a needle, like a glucose testing, and if the blood comes on the needle, then that will break your wudu. Why? Because it has exited the wound. If it exits the wound, it breaks your wudu.
Blood from the teeth
while brushing. So the blood from the teeth while brushing, if a person sees that they have more blood than saliva, it will break your wudu also.
is feel it on my hand. Trying to make it which is more.
So when you spit, that's how you see. So the way the question is how would you know if blood is more or not? When you spit and you see that it has more red than white color or whatever color, clear color, then that's more blood.
And another thing, sometimes you bleed from the nose, then blood becomes clotted and it stays inside.
Good. So the question is what about blood that is clotted from the nose or any, let's say phlegm, mucus when you blow your nose, that does not break your wudu. So when you clean your nose and you see clots of blood, that does not break your wudu. Only flowing blood that moves away from its wound breaks your wudu.
Not very, very clear on that. Side of taking from the underground, reclining from something. Principally, I don't know what.
Principally is that if you are so firm on the ground that you cannot pass wind, that will be a position or a state that does not break wudu. But if you're in any way leaning or you're relaxed or you're not upright in any other position where there is the possibility of passing wind, then that will break wudu. So just understand the rule, and in any other position we can apply that rule. The rule is, as long as a person in that position, there's no way you can basically pass wind, then that will be a position that does not break wudu. There's like 3-4 masail that comes, like leaning and then sleeping and then reclining in one of the sajda positions. So in any position, if a person is able to pass wind and they're sitting in that position, they will lose their wudu if they fall asleep or they get drowsy or knock off. And if in any position where they cannot pass wind, it is not possible for them unless they move their position, and they fall asleep in those positions, then it will not break wudu. Yeah, all those come back to that principle, right?
So principally, it is not reclining which breaks your wudu, rather ability to pass the wind.
That's correct. Yes.
The thing which makes the
Yes. Inshallah. So we're gonna continue after salat time, about 8 o'clock, inshallah. And I see some questions, direct messages that are questions coming up. Inshallah, a lot of those questions are going to be discussed today in our today's class, inshallah. Is that demand that we take a ghusl. So in a general sense, going over things that when do you have to take a wajib ghusl. So if you remember from our definitions that wajib in practice is something that we have to do regardless. That if a person does not do it, then they will be considered sinful. And the only difference that we have between fard and a wajib is the way that textually they're defined in the Quran or the Sunnah. So when do we have to take ghusl? Anytime a person, male or female, has any discharge, regardless of if they have intercourse or not, then a person must take ghusl. One of the questions we had was, what if a person does not have a discharge, or rather they have seminal fluids, muzzy? Will that is that going to also demand and necessitate that a person takes ghusl? With that, wudu is broken, but a person does not have to do ghusl. Ghusl is only when a person has with desires, they have discharge, such as money, and this is regardless of if a person's sleeping in an awakened state, if a person is dreaming, fantasy, any of those things. If there is discharge, a person must take a ghusl. And another related masala or ruling that comes up is if a person's sleeping and they don't know and they're confused of if they should take a ghusl or not, if they have any evidences, any signs that show that they should be taking a ghusl, then they should take a ghusl, such as wetness, or they may be remember something and things like that, then they should take a ghusl. The last one to discuss on when is ghusl wajib is as soon as a person is, a man and a woman, a husband and wife, they are together and they are together in the sense where, they're having relations. As soon as penetration is done, ghusl is now wajib. And it may seem as if this is like a no-brainer, but sometimes in Ramadan, this is one of the most, few people ask about this, that at what stage is ghusl wajib? So as soon as penetration comes in, then a person must make ghusl, even if they did not discharge. So the first masala was if there is any discharge, they must make ghusl. The second masala is if they're having relations, even if they did not make discharge, but they had penetration, they must make ghusl. And then finally, when is it wajib? When a woman, they finish their monthly cycle, then they must make a ghusl also. Few things related to this. In a state when a person is not in the smaller impurity, they're actually at the bigger impurity. Remember, if we remember from our notes, hadith asghar, akbar, then what happens is a person is not allowed to recite a full ayat of Quran. So one full ayat of Quran cannot be recited. So let's say a person is going to sleep and they're in the state where they must take a ghusl, but they're going to sleep. What should they do? For example, you have your du'as and your ayatul kursi and last few verses of Surah Al Imran that you recite. A person can recite them not with the niyat and intention of tilawat, rather with the niyat of du'a. And at any time, without any reason, they cannot say a full ayat of the Quran. So for the reason of tilawat, not du'a. Du'a is different, that's for protection and things like that. But the other masala that comes up is as soon as a person knows that they must take a shower and they must take a ghusl, they should try their best to immediately go and take a ghusl, whether it's the night or whether it's the morning. There's 3 sunnahs from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One is when a person has a wajib ghusl, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would immediately go and make ghusl. Next is that if he did not and he delayed it, meaning he went to go to sleep or he ate something, then he would make wudu and then go to sleep, or make wudu and then eat something to come into a higher level of purity. So this is a sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's not a wajib thing, but it's, again, as we learned sunnah, that is what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam practiced with a habit, and he would leave it ahyanan sometimes. Another important thing to remember for ghusl and when it becomes binding upon a person, if a person is in the masjid and they have to take ghusl, they cannot be in the Shari masjid. They cannot be in the premise of the masjid. So if they're in a masjid, Islamic masjid, they should remove themselves and they should go make a shower. Similarly, you cannot come inside an Islamic masjid until you are in a higher state of purity. So nifas and nifas and any sort of postpartum bleeding, that will also necessitate a ghusl, meaning when a person is done with it, then they will be taking a ghusl to clean. And again, Mazi, there's two things. Mazi is the fluid when a person is excited. Mani is seminal fluids, which is the ejaculation. In mazi, it does not break the ghusl, meaning it only breaks wudu, not ghusl. Mani is ejaculation when a person is excited and they ejaculate. This is what will break the wudu and ghusl. So there's a big difference. Even if a person gets it on their clothes or their body parts, it does not break their ghusl. It will only break their wudu. And of course, when they pray, they should clean that area and then they can make wudu. So the Prophet ﷺ, he would make wudu when he's in a higher state of janaba. We call this janaba. When he's in the higher state of impurity, he would make wudu to either eat or go to sleep. So he would try to move himself higher in cleanliness and purity by making wudu. Even though a person technically cannot touch the Quran or pray when they're in that state, right? This is things that are not allowed. You cannot pray, you cannot recite the entire Quran with the niyat of tilawat, with the niyat of recitation. And then also you cannot be in the masjid. So the Prophet ﷺ, he would, because of his cleanliness and the purity, he would immediately make ghusl, or he would at least make wudu and then eat something, or at least make wudu and then sleep. This is just the sunnah of Rasulullah ﷺ. Wadi is another thing. So there's three types of fluids. There's wadi, there is mani, and there's madhi. So wadi is just, sometimes it's called the prostate fluid. Sometimes it's just the smell of the urine before when a person urinates. This is just, it won't even break the wudu, nor will it break the ghusl. When a person is excited and they're, in that state of desire, and then there's discharge, that will break the wudu, not ghusl. And finally, when a person ejaculates, that will break wudu and ghusl both. All right, now going into the sunnahs of ghusl. So number one, we mentioned this, but I want to go in a little more detail. Number one, starting with Bismillah. Number two, washing the hands till the wrists. And I mentioned this before, that we're using the hands to clean and cleanse ourselves. So the tools of cleaning yourself, that needs to be clean also. Number three, wash away any impurities and wash the private parts. Any najasat that may be on the body, a person should clean that. The private parts, even if there's no najasat on the private parts, a person should start from there. If we remember the Prophet ﷺ, the sunnah method of making ghusl is through a bucket. So there's less water wastage and less water used. And this is why when we see the sunnahs of wudu, number one, what are we doing? After Bismillah and washing your hands and wiping away and washing any impurities, you're making wudu. You're making the steps of wudu. Then there's pouring water over yourself, head first, then the right side, then the left side, and then rubbing your entire body. Now, let's say we're not using a bucket system and we're using a shower. So a person can still implement the sunnah of Rasulullah ﷺ by when a person gets into the shower, of course, saying Bismillah, washing your hands, cleaning the limbs of wudu, and making sure any impurities is not there, and then make sure all your entire body is wet and there is no impurities on the body, and you're rubbing your body. So this is the sunnahs of ghusl. Now we're going to transition over to tayammum. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tells us in the Quran that if a person does not find water, فَتَيَمَّمُوا صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا, he says, then make tayammum. And I'll go into a little on what is tayammum. Tayammum literally means that a person is making intention for something, right? Look at what we're doing. We're taking sand, we're taking dust, and we're rubbing it upon our bodies. So is that supposed to be making a person clean? That's actually going to make you more dirty, right? That's why one of the main things about tayammum is it must have niyat, as we're going to get into. So literally it means making a purpose and making an intention. And Islamically, what we call the lexical meaning, the terminological meaning, is that a person is wiping the face and the hands on soil which is pure. So you're wiping yourself with soil, and that soil has to be something that is meets certain conditions. And inshallah, we're gonna get into that in the next slides. So this is tayammum. And this is actually a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was the entire army, they were posted at a place, and they were actually looking for Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha's necklace that she had gotten from, I believe, her mother. And she was looking frantically for this necklace. I think it was either her mother or she had borrowed it from her sister. And everybody, the entire people, they didn't have any water, and they were getting upset that what is going on? Why are we looking for this necklace? And this is when the verses of Tayammum were revealed. And it was a mercy that when we don't have water, when we don't have the avenues of making wudu or ghusl, then a person can فَتَيَمُّمُ صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا, then a person can make tayammum. So what makes tayammum correct? So number one is intending. We have to have intention. A person must have intention for this tayammum to be valid. There's a lot of discussion on this intention itself, but to summarize, the intention must be that you are not only cleaning yourself, meaning getting into a state of purity. Number two, it must be that you're getting into the state of purity to pray or do some sort of a ibadat, or act of worship. And number three, that you know that this is going to, it'll make prayer and it'll make touching the Quran and these things permissible upon you. So you have to make a proper intention for tayammum itself. Tayammum is not valid, if a person is being away from water the distance of about a mile. So you're in a place or in a situation where the water is not accessible to you. So what does that mean? A person then has to actually look for water. Physically, you have to make an effort to find water and see if you can find water. The other thing is how much should a person look? So some of the fuqaha mentioned that a person, they should see, to the best of their ability, okay, you know what? The next city is coming up. I can purchase water there. There are bottles there, Walmart there, or something. So to the best of your ability, a person should try to find water. Or let's say you're in the wilderness. Are you now going to just, I don't know where I am. I'm just going to try your best to see which direction, where can you get and acquire water. Now, that being said, there's two types of absence of water. One is literally what we call real absence. The water is not available and you have no access to water. Let's say you're camping, you're traveling, or whatever the scenario may be, you have no access to water, you can't find any water. And it mentions to the amount of a mile in each direction, you have firm knowledge that there is no water. Then a person can make tayammum. Second is legal absence, hukmi. Hukmi, remember the word hukmi, we used it before too. Legally, there's no water. Why? Even if there is water, you don't have the ijazat, you don't have the permission to use it. Now, let me give you an example of this. For example, you have water, and a lot of the Muslim countries in the East, they do this, where they have water, but they need to conserve that water to use for drinking. Their desert population, they're in the desert. So literally, I think 6 months, 5 months out of the year, they make tayammum. And then the rest of the water they use for their food and their drinking. So you have the water, but you cannot use it. Or let's say a person is so sick, they're in the city, they're sick, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save all of us, they have such a sickness that two conditions are going to be met. And I'll tell you those two conditions in a minute. If those sort of people that are so sick that they cannot touch water, or the usage of water is going to make them more sick, then they can make tayammum. Even though the water is right there, the faucet is right there, they're in their own homes. What are those two conditions? Number one, ishtidadul marad. Ishtidadul marad means severity of sickness. Meaning you are in such a sickness that you using water is going to make you even more sick. So if you know for a fact that you're going to be more sick by using such and such water, make tayammum. Number two is if a person uses water that is going to prolong the sickness. If a person feels that, of course, not just feels, but by medical opinion, that a person is using water that is going to prolong their sickness, then they can make tayammum. This will allow a person to make tayammum. Okay. Now, that being said, if a person is in such a severe thing that, it's not just their opinion, but rather their medical experts and doctors are saying, no, don't put water on your eyes, for example, or don't do this and do. Then a person can, for those two reasons, they can make tayammum regardless of if they have water or not. So now number 3, what can we make tayammum out of? The general rule is that we make tayammum from anything that is of earth substance, anything that is earthly. For example, you have dirt, dust, you have stones, you have sand, anything of earth. And the general rule is if anything can be put into the fire and melted or become ashes, then it cannot be used for tayammum. Simple example, let's say you have wood and our drywall, everybody has drywall. So can you use drywall? It has gypsum in it, but what's the outer layer of it? If it can be turned into ashes, or it can be melted into a way that, or it's prepared by putting into fire, then that will be not valid to make tayammum upon. So anything of substance of the earth, jinsul ard, then it's permissible. For example, a person has dust, a person has let's say any sort of a stone, a marble, rocks, any of those will be permissible. Even if a person's, let's say they're in a sandstorm and they get sand all over themselves. Sand is something one we can use, right? They can technically make niyat and start rubbing their hands and face, and that will be considered tayammum. Okay. Now, so that means a person cannot use wood, silver, gold, or any other metals. Number 4, the entire hand should be used when we're making the wiping. And I'll demonstrate to you guys, inshallah, how that's done. And there is 2 strikes with the inside of the palms. This is the inside of the palms. There's going to be 2 strikes, one, and then the face, and then another one, and the hands. And then when I do the sunnah part, I'll actually show you guys how it's done. If a person cannot make wudu, they're sick, especially people in the hospital, such sicknesses that they cannot go and make wudu, salah does not drop off. If they have the ability, they can walk, they can speak, they can move their hands and limbs, they should continue to pray. So what you can do is you can provide for those family members or whatever. You can bring just a little marble rock tile from one of the stores, Home Depot or something, some rock. They just go like this, and that's it. They can rub their hands and they can face, and they'll be in a state of purity. And some of the elders, they want to be in the state of impurity, especially if it's very sick and it might be their last days. They want to be in a state of purity. All right, sunnahs of tayammum. I'll get to questions, inshallah. Sunnahs of tayammum. Number 1, to say Bismillah. So this is, again, in general, every single action that we do, we say Bismillah. Number 2, to do it without a pause. You do it without a pause, meaning there's 2 aspects of it. You're doing both those aspects, one after the other. There's no stopping. Number 3, to rub the hands forwards and backwards in the soil after you have shaken, after which you should shake off the hands and take away anything. And I'll show you guys that right now. And number 4, to open the fingers and spread them apart. So I'll try to make my camera in a way that I can show you guys. So let me just show the students that are about in front of me. So suppose this is the dust, this is the dirt, this is the soil, whatever it may be, even the dust that's on the windows, any sort of jinsul ard, any sort of earth-like substance. Number 1, your finger should be apart. Okay. So your finger should be apart. What you do is you put your hand upon the soil, you go forward, backwards, you go like this, you get the dirt on there, you get the dust on there, the sand or whatever it may be. And then you raise them up, and then you just knock off any of the extra sand. And then number 1, you're gonna do face, all encompassing wherever the wudu portion of the face is, encompass every single thing. That's number 1. Number 2, you're gonna go back to the same place, even if it's the same spot, you can do it. It's okay. People say, "Oh no, my handprint is there now." No, it's okay. Even if it's on the same place, you go like this, back and forth, remove any excess sand. And then now you're gonna start with the left hand to the right hand. And one of the things mentions 4 fingers. Use the upper 4 fingers. Make sure you encompass everything. And then now you have the palm that's still dry and has not been used because you use 4 fingers. Now use the palm for the bottom. And then this, and this. And that's it. So that will be tayammum for wudu. That will be also tayammum for ghusl. Let me do it one more time for the brothers and sisters that are online. And show this. So let's just say that my table here is the area where there's going to be dust or something. You put your hands down, you go back and forth to get the dust or the soil on your hands. Then you raise your hands and you just clear off any extra. And then with the first strike, you do your entire face. Then you go back to the same place or another place or whatever. You go again one time back and forth with your fingers spread apart. Now with the left hand, you go to the right hand upper. And then with the palm, you just go on the bottom. This part you can do as you wish. It doesn't have to be 4 fingers and palm. I'm just mentioning that because that's what some of the books of fiqh said. So you can do it anyway. And then the left one, now you do left, upper, and then bottom. Okay, so that will be considered the tayammum for wudu. And that's also tayammum for ghusl itself. Okay, now let me go through these messages. Okay, so first question is, when ghusl is wajib, how long can a person delay it? So to the best of their ability, a person should try their best not to delay it. And to the best of their ability, they should try to do ghusl as soon as possible. And of course, they should not pass through a prayer without praying that prayer, just because they don't have taharat. Bismillah in the bathroom. So we discussed this last class that if a person turns off or closes the toilet area, then you can read your du'as, you can read Bismillah, and you can read your ibadat. I heard if you're allowed. Okay. So the question is, I heard you're allowed to keep your braids while doing ghusl. Is it permissible to make braids and then do ghusl to make it easier? Or is if you already had braids before ghusl, are there certain conditions to this rule as well? Either or, doesn't matter. The point for women, if they have braids, to make it easier, they don't have to open it as long as the water reaches their roots. Now, if you decide to do braids before the ghusl or after the ghusl, it doesn't matter. It's not a what do you say, hila, which is, it's not a way of getting out of something. The main ruling is still applying, which is the water is going to be reaching the roots of the hairs. If there is a fear of getting sick with the cold water, like snow, yes. So a person can make tayammum if they feel that they will be getting sick in a severe manner. Is there ijma or from hadith? Is this an ijma? What do you mean?
The derivation, how did we derive?
This is from Quran ayat.
No, the burned and ashes. That is what when I send that message.
Yeah, so this is from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ on what he did tayammum on. So the people, the fuqaha, they derive those things from the hadith.
So derivation.
Yeah. So remember, ijma is not a separate thing from the hadith. Ijma is just meaning consensus, and that consensus is upon some sort of ayat or some sort of a hadith. So it's actually the same thing. Maybe what we're thinking about is qiyas. Qiyas can be taking one aspect of one hadith or an ayat and applying it to another ruling. Yeah, so you can take dust. What sort of dust is permissible? It should be dust that is clean, shari'i clean. So if you walk on it, that's still shari'i clean. But if a dog goes urinates on it, that's not considered shari'i clean, right? So it has to be things that are shari'i clean. Even if it's wet, if it's mud water, it's fine. You know, if you're looking at dust, you can look at soil, you can look at rocks, other aspects also. But even if it's wet, there's no issues. Good question. So the point of wudu is to clean oneself, but will not putting the dust on our face and hands defeat the point of cleanliness? 100%, it does. Which is why Shariat has given us something against our logics. And one saying of Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu comes to mind. When the Khuffayn, where do we wipe? We wipe on the top. And so he said, if Shariat came to be according to the logics of men, then we should actually be wiping on the bottom, not the top, because we don't walk on the top, we walk on the bottom. So tayammum does make a person in a sense defeat the purpose of cleanliness, which is why we take out the dust and we take out any of the substance that is on our hands. And it came as a what we say khilaful qiyas. It's against the normal way what we assume and perceive, to show that this is another exception to the rule, that if a person cannot make wudu and taharat like this, then they can do such and such thing. So yes, it is against, outwardly it's against cleanliness, but because there was a need and there is a need for getting clean through revelation, we have made it into a way that is used to get into purity. Now that doesn't mean throw yourself on dirt and swing it around. No, you don't want to soil yourself. Take away the aspects and the particles of dirt when you're cleaning your hands, and then rub your face and everything. If there's dust on the wall, will that suffice for tayammum? Yes, it will. If we see an elderly person perform tayammum wrongly at home wall, how should we approach them regarding the rulings? So if they're, you just talk to them, speak to them, see if, you can advise them in a manner that is appropriate. Especially with elderly, you want to make sure you have full adab and consideration before advising anybody. Can a bag of sand be used for tayammum? Yes, it can. In a hospital or travel or hospital, or better, like a tile you mentioned. You could use either or. Any of those will work. If we have impurities on our body, do we take that off before doing tayammum? You should clean yourself to the best of your ability. If a person doesn't have water to clean themselves, it's fine. Then they will just make tayammum, and to the best of their ability, it's out of need. So that will be excused. All right, let's continue on to Khuffayn. Khuffayn literally means a leather sock. And we mentioned that this is one aspect of our deen that has been narrated so many ahadith and so many narrations that it's not possible for anybody to say that it is a lie. Meaning every generation has narrated this so much that it's all at the level of tawatur. Tawatur means that there is no possibility of any narrator being wrong or lying about it, and it comes to what we call ilmul yaqeen. It gives us certainty that this is from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's called tawatur, or another word for it is mutawatir. So what is it and the conditions for it? So number one, khuffayn, we're going to get into these conditions, but khuffayn should be worn upon purity. And they don't have to be leather socks. You can go to REI, for example, Walmart. Now there's so many other, Amazon, there's so many stores that you can buy thick socks that will fulfill all of these conditions. So it doesn't have to be leather socks. The leather socks, if you guys have seen me, sometimes I wear these wudu guard or wudu gear or something like that. Those are all considered khuffayn. So number one, a person must wear them after washing the feet. Meaning after wudu, you're putting them on. Number two, they must cover the feet up to the ankles without being tied. Oh, I put a with being tied. This should be a without being tied, my bad. So so it has to be upon the ankles without being tied, meaning there's nothing that is tying it upon the foot. There's no elastic, there's no knot, there's no anything else. Maybe some of you guys have seen like a zip that goes on the side with a buckle on the end. That's not holding it in place. So test it out. You cannot zip it up. Will it still be on your foot? It will be. And that's how they've made those leather khuffayn. So especially the ones that you are looking into stores and REI and other stores, one of the things to see is, what is it being tied upon? Is there elastic on the top? Is there a buckle on the top? how's it holding its shape and being on the ankles. Number 3, it should not absorb water to the skin. What does that mean? When a person puts water on top with their wet hands on top, your skin should not get wet. It can feel cool due to the wetness, but it should not get wet. Those are two different things. Feeling wet, yes, you have waterproof socks, you put water on top. Of course, there's going to be some sort of coolness that you'll feel. Same thing with the, when we're fasting and a person gargles, they'll feel a coolness in their mouth, but that's not drinking water. So when a person wipes on top of the Khuffayn, it should not be such that the water is going right directly to the skin because it's so thin or it's not thick enough material. Number 4, a person should be continuously able to walk 3 miles or more in them. And this is where a lot of the litmus tests come for these, over-the-counter Khuffayn and nylon socks. You cannot, how can you walk at least 3 miles on normal nylon socks? That's almost hard, right? You have to have a shoe, you have to have some sort of a protection. So this is something that, and again, if the question comes to mind, where are we getting these conditions from? They're coming from the conditions that are mentioned in the hadith. For example, there's many hadith in Bukhari that mention what sort of the socks were these, and on commentary and all of that, there's actually a whole chapter. And so we are deriving it from the hadith. And, I still remember one of our exams for the Sahih Bukhari was, they gave the hadith and say, show us where all the derivation is, and you have to write it out. So, it's all derived from the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number 5, should not have a tear the size of 3 of the smallest toes. So it can have a teacher. It can't have a tear though. So it can't have a tear more than the size of the 3 smallest toes. What is the 3 smallest toes? You can say that your pinky is this much. So about this much, 3 times that. The width of that, not length, width. And now if it's sporadic, if there's a tear here, tear here, tear here, then if you join all of those together and combine them, and if it's big enough, then you cannot make a masa. You cannot wipe over those. And the general ruling is that once a person puts them on and their feet are washed and they put them on, meaning they either did wudu or they're in the middle of making wudu and they put them on, then once they break their wudu, a person who's a resident has 1 day and 1 night, 24 hours to wipe. Meaning, let's say I put on my Khuffayn or my socks at, let's say 7 o'clock in the morning. I broke my wudu at 8 o'clock. Till the next day, 8 a.m., I am allowed to have to wipe over them. As soon as the time expires, I cannot wipe over them again. What I can do is I can remove them, wash my feet, put them back on if I have wudu. If I don't have wudu, as soon as you take them off, your wudu also breaks. Okay? That's for a person that's a resident. Now, same thing for a traveler. If a person is traveling, they get 3 days and 3 nights, which is the equivalent of 72 hours. So let's say again, in the same scenario, I put my Khuffayn on at 7 o'clock. I have wudu till 10 o'clock. I break wudu at 10 o'clock. From that day, 10 o'clock, 72 hours is going to be my limit of how long I can wipe over them. Okay. Another important thing to remember is people, when they travel, they always go home. So let's say you were traveling, 1 day passes, 2 days pass, and then now you arrive and you come to Fremont again. You're now a resident. So then you will change your status. And if the amount of the status that you just changed into is completed, is done, you're done. And if it's not, for example, I'm a resident and then I change my status to a traveler, then it gets extended to 3 days, 3 nights. Simple. Wiping over other things. So a person, there's only ijazat, there's only leeway to wipe over the socks, leather socks, Khuffayn, right? And any of the conditions that are not followed on the Khuffayn, for example, nylon socks, the ones we have, dry fits, and any of these, a person cannot wipe over them. You cannot wipe over your gloves, caps, hijabs, turbans, shoes. That's a big one. Shoes are not the same as Khuffayn. Khuffayn are socks. You don't walk around with your Khuffayn. You walk with your shoes. So a person should not be wiping over their shoes. Okay. All right. Before we get into injuries, I'm going to show you guys really quick how you actually wipe over. So when you make wudu, you're done with the last step of the wudu, and you're now, the portion is to wash your feet. What you do is you take the water in your hands and you let go of that water. Imagine this is my foot. You go from the front of the foot and you just wipe over like that till the ankle. The front part is the fard part. The rest is sunnah. So you just go over the whole thing to complete the sunnah. If a person were to just go like this, that's also sufficient. Okay.
So first, like quarter.
Yeah. Let me just go through the questions. Elastic cannot be present. Elastic can be present, but elastic should not be the thing that ties it on the top. Meaning there's usually, for example, you can see on the top, there's a thicker, stronger band. That should not be there. And inshallah, next week, I'll bring some of the Khuffayn that I have, and I can show you on the screen that how it is on the top. It's like, lines. And it's not a elastic thing that's so easy way to test it out. Just cut that off. If you cut it off, is it going to stay on your leg? Yes, it will stay on your leg. So that's what I mean. So when we do wudu and wear these and go to work and the whole day we can wipe over them. Yes, we can. Yes. So when you make wudu and you wear these socks, and that's what I used to do also, and I know a lot of brothers from college and work, they do that. There's a wudu gear, I think it's called, or you know what the company? It's called wudu gear or some. There's 2-3 companies out there, and they're so thin they look like business socks. So you can put them on, put your shoes on, go to work. As long as you followed all the things that we just mentioned, all the conditions and all that stuff, you can wipe over them for 24 hours. Come back at night, you can take them off. Okay, good question. What if I'm wearing only one of the Khuffayn? You cannot wear one of the Khuffayn. You have to have both. So you cannot combine between wiping and washing. That's the general rule. There's actually going to be exemption coming up in the next slide, but we are in need of also. So what I was mentioning about, for example, when a person is in haid or janaba, is that they should not be reciting Quran with the niyat of tilawat. They can recite du'as, they can recite wazifa, like things that were for protection, for du'a intention, not tilawat intention. Yes. Start from the toes. So if this is my toe, start from the toes and then just work yourself out. That's it. One time, not more than that. If the Khuffayn are dirty, wiping is still valid. There's no issues with that. If there's najasat on them, they should be cleaned. Okay, so now we're gonna go into wiping. And I hope everybody's writing and taking notes, because I'm sure many of us, including myself, we don't have the memory of Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah. Imam Bukhari, who was known for his established amazing memory, where he memorized everything and the sanad and everything. So you will be turning in your notes, and inshallah, at the end of this, we will be having a test, because this is going to be our last portion for the purification. Then we're going to do salah. We're about 1 week behind actually now. But there was a question weeks factored in, so don't worry about it. What if the water leaks into the Khuffayn? If the water reaches inside the Khuffayn in such a way that your foot becomes wet, your Khuffayn are no longer valid. But how would water leak into it? Like through a hole?
Maybe from the top, maybe from the bottom.
No, not like that. So if it's coming in from the top, that's not going to be considered a leak. But if there's a hole, or it's not a strong enough material, and the water, you can feel the wetness and actually see the wetness, then that will be considered invalidating it. No, the test is not today. I will be sending it out on campus, inshallah. All right, wiping over. So we did the wiping over other things. Injuries. So this is a few things to remember here. If a person gets injured, whether it's in any portion where a person makes wudu or it's a portion that a person does not make wudu, these rulings will apply. So number one, the first ruling is in Khuffayn, we put our Khuffayn upon washing our feet. We wash our feet and then we put them on. In injuries, we don't have to do that. So a person can put a bandage on, let's say a cast or something on, even if they have not cleaned their skin from before. Because of course, when you get injured, you don't even have the time to do any of that. So a person gets injured, what should they do? They can cover that, they can bandage that area, and they can, even if the blood is seeping through, even if it's bleeding, it's fine. You can bandage that area. Now, the ruling wise is when you have that bandage or that cast or whatever it may be, I'm just saying bandage. I know cast is not called a bandage, but in general sense, any sort of bandage, cast, any, let's say you have a stent or anything, if it's there and it's part of your limb and you need to make wudu on it, we're now going to discuss how do you make wudu over it. So a person, to the best of their ability, they should try to wash whatever portion they can. So if they have hands that are free, they will wash their hands that are free. Skin in the middle, maybe just to the best of their ability, they will try to wash. If they cannot do that, they will just wipe over the bandage. So let me give you an example. This is my forearm. Let's say this part has a cast on it, but this is free and this part is free. So to the best of ability, I just wash this without hurting, injuring. If it's hurting too much, then you can skip this. But to the best of your ability, you just do a wash. And then you just take some water and just you wipe over the cast. There's no time limit. If the cast falls off, it doesn't matter. You can replace the bandage, you can replace the cast, you can change it, as long as that area does not heal. Okay. Now, this happens a lot with band-aids, right? Cast, they're like they're on the body. Let's say a person has a bandage, those things, and they're on the skin because of bleeding or cut or whatever. Ideally, I think you're supposed to replace them every single day. But what happens is, as soon as they get wet or you wipe over them, then they're already peeling off and they're already coming around, regardless of you're bleeding or not. So what you do is, wherever the band-aid area is, don't get any water around it. Then you take your hands, you wet your hands, and to the best of your ability, you just go around it and just one over it, just to finish the wiping aspect. Don't make it wet. Don't make it soaking where you now have to take another bandage and put it on, anything like that. Does that make sense? All right. Again, there's no time limit, and you don't have to tie it on purity, and you can change the bandage and continue wiping it over the limb. Let me just make sure that I finish all of them so that I wanted. Yeah, so when does this stop now? Bandages, they stop when a person, the wound heals. As soon as it heals, it falls off or you take it off, now you cannot no longer wipe over that area. All right, let's see if there's any questions before I move on. Well, too many questions, guys. Will we receive a study guide for it? I will send something out, and actually the test itself will sort of be a study guide. So taking notes, guys, this is going to be for yourself, right? I just want to see that students are writing notes, and this is the traditional way of learning Islamic knowledge. Traditional way, we write. We don't, typing it, you can make the excuse over, type it, it's going to be there forever and this and that. But writing is the way that we memorize. The writing is the way that we retain it. Even if a person is not able to write that fast, too much information, to the best of your ability, just try your best, right? So the sister there said the information is a lot. They're not able to write down. Write questions for yourself. While you're taking notes in my class, for example, write questions for yourself. What will trigger memories for you? For example, some of the headings I make it a question on purpose. What is the sunnahs of this? Or what time limit does a injury bandage have? So write yourself questions. You don't need to write everything down. Just something that will trigger memories for you. If not, you can always as much as you're able to just outline the class. Don't write notes, just outline the entire class, meaning this was the topic, this was the second detail, third detail, and things like that. What if we see the blood sorry, wait, what is this? What if we see the blood has spread under the bandage? That's fine. So if a person has a bandage and you're bleeding through it, that's fine. Because you put a bandage on it, it takes a different ruling. What if there's muscular pain and you cannot move much? Yes, then wipe. Then don't wash and wipe. And even if that is hard, then even that can be lessened down to, right? So for example, if you cannot wipe this and this and this, according to the best of your ability, you can just do one wipe. Or you can just take some water, literally just go like this and you're done. Okay? If a person is bleeding from a non-wudu area, shin, can we just put a bandage over it and make wudu and pray despite it bleeding? Or should we wait till the end of the prayer time and see if the bleeding stops before making wudu? So I'm going to discuss that ruling right now. But what you want to do is you want to wait as long as you can to see if that's going to be stopping, and then put a bandage on it and then pray. Bleeding is different than some of the other masail that's I'm about to mention right now, but let me I'll mention that right now too. Yes, the information on the slides is the most important. So for example, the reading has a lot more details, but these are the things that I picked out and I keyworded that this is what everybody should know. So when you're washing your face, you don't have to go inside the eye. You can close your eye and you will just wash, outside of the eye. So contact lenses, you can keep your contact lenses, just keep your eyes closed and don't press on there. Just go over it. As long as water hits the skin, you're good. All right, so one thing to remember, we have now an aspect of people that are excused from tahara. And that's called, literally, it's called ma'adhur. Ma'adhur means excused. And these are those people who have chronic illness. They have some sort of issue that they're constantly bleeding, constantly some illnesses coming, such as they're constantly passing gas. They're always, I forgot what the technical term is. I think it's called incontinence, where they're always urinating, their droplets coming out and things like that. Or it may be that they have discharge throughout the day. So in these sort of situations, what should the person be doing, right? So there's two things to remember on this. Number one is there is the fact that somebody becomes established as a person who is excused. And a person, number two, is they retain the status of somebody that is excused. So number one, how does a person become established as an excused person? A person becomes established as an excused person when they suffer from the illness for an entire full prayer time. For example, Dhuhr to Asr. And in that time, there is no let up from the illness that will allow him or her enough time to perform wudu and offer salah. This will be the establishment. This will establish a person as an excused person. And number two is, how does a person remain as an excused person? They will remain as an excused person if that illness occurs. Not if, as long as the illness occurs in every prayer time after it has been established, even if it's once. So this is a very common issues. For example, somebody cannot stop themselves from passing wind. So if that's happening for an entire time period, they become established as we'll call ma'adhur, excused person. And they will retain that status as long as between any of the prayers that happens, even if it's once. As soon as it doesn't happen, they go to zero. They are no longer established as an excused person. Does that make sense? Some people have chronic issues. Like, for example, they know in winter, it's hard for them to stop the droplets of urine. And for them, they will lose their status for half the year. Then when winter comes, they will re-establish themselves, and then they will be following the rulings of an excused person till whatever, like I said, one time frame, one namaz time comes where they are no longer in that issue. Yes.
You don't have to do
I'm about to tell you what it is. So it's two things. Now you're established, and number two is you are a person that is maintaining that status of an excused person. So now what is this person supposed to be doing? This person, for every single time prayer that comes in, regardless of if they're continuing to pass wind or there's other bleeding going on, they will make wudu and they will pray as many prayers as they want till that time period ends. As soon as that time period ends, they need to make another wudu for all the prayers that are going to be in that time period. Okay, so you will be renewing your wudu at each time slot, time period, and you will be using that for that time period.
for every salah time, like say one to also you one will do certain amount.
Yeah, Zohar to Asr, one wudu, Asr to Maghrib, one wudu. Now, of course, the rules still apply. Let's say you made that wudu, but then you did something other than your excuse, you will break your wudu. So let's say a person has chronic bleeding, and I remember this is really sad. About a month ago, somebody contacted me, and the sister said that her mother has chronic bleeding at all times, and she hasn't prayed in 20 years. What is she supposed to do? She's supposed to pray. That does not excuse a person out of the prayer. So they're supposed to follow these rulings where they make wudu, they pray, even if they're bleeding, which is fine. You put a pad, you put something there. Even if you're bleeding, pray. Next prayer namaz time comes, Maghrib comes, for example, you make wudu again. Even if you're bleeding, even if everything is happening, you continue praying. When let's say you make a wudu, but some other issue comes up. Let's say you went to sleep, you threw up, or any other issue comes up, then you will actually break your wudu. Then you will have to do another wudu. So that should be understood. Okay, so that is all the slides and masail. Let me see. All right, so the question is, what if I have applied a cream, say for fungal infections, the water needs to be avoided because of medicine, not the infection. So those sort of things you can wash, and you can remove the cream, and then you can wash that area of your body and then reapply the cream later on. So that's not the same as being injured in the sense where you have a cut or you have a wound or something like that. Can someone do wiping over henna? Meaning like not even touching, not even rubbing, just wiping over it?
No, sometimes people wouldn't know that.
No. So if the question is, can someone do wiping over henna that's on the head? You will have to wash that off, and then you will have to, for ghusl, right? You will have to wash your hair. For wudu, as long as there's some hair that you can make wiping over. Meaning, let's say you were only doing henna over here, but this is free, then that will work. But make sure that the fulfillment of that wudu is happening though. There's no special rule for the henna. Time period is the excuse time or the prayer time. The time period is the prayer time. So Zohar to Asr, Asr to Maghrib, Maghrib to Isha, Isha to all the way Fajr. So one more time, how does a person become established? When there is a time period where in the entire time period of Salah, and the entire time period, there is not a gap of that person not having the illness, whatever the illness may be, then they will be considered and established as an excused person. And then once they're established as an excused person, then to maintain their status as an excused person, every single prayer, at least once that issue should come up. And if, let's say, even the next one, it doesn't come up, they will be no longer counted as an excused person. Now, in practice, what's supposed to be happening? Let's say, for example, Dhuhr to Asr. A person's waiting, and they're still having the issues. They're still having a chronic illness. And they wait all the way till the last portion before the salah is out. And they know that this issue is still, whatever it may be, they're bleeding or they're urinating or whatever it's happening, it's still continuing to happen. So then what do? Then at the last portion, they will make wudu, they will pray. And then that will establish them as an excused person. The next prayer, they will have to make another wudu. They make another wudu, and the issue is still continuing. And then they will be considered as an excused person. Excused person cannot lead other people. Excused person cannot lead non-excused individuals in salah. Yes. Almost till the end, where it's about to go, then you know for a fact that there's no possibility of you not having the excuse and praying. So then you would make wudu and go pray. No, only for the establishment. Only for the establishment. The rest, after you have been established as a ma'dhur, as an excused person, the rest of the time you don't need to wait at all. The rest of the time you will make wudu, pray. Make wudu, pray. And of course, in the middle, you have to clean yourself, make sure that, body is clean and clothes are clean.
Established when both
Yes.
halfway still established until that period is
yeah, you're established till the end. Let's say now what happens is, to maintain that status, you didn't see the illness come up almost like 5 minutes, 4 minutes before the time ends. But it has to be there somewhere. If it doesn't, then you are no longer established as a ma'thur person. Make sense? Some individuals have purification waswasas, constant doubt if wudu is broken. Do these individuals fall under the category of an excused person? No, they do not. People who have constant taharat waswasas, whether it's cleanliness, whether it's how they did their wudu or ghusl, their answer and solution is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to one of the companions, that they had waswasas on passing wind. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said to them, have you heard it? Meaning, yeah, okay, you have the waswasa, oh, maybe I passed gas, maybe I did this, maybe I did that. Remember, ahkam are not to make you so OCD, right? So then this Sahabi, he was thinking about this constantly. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, look at his jawab. He said, have you heard it? He said, no, I have not heard it. And he said, then you have wudu. Meaning, until that's why there's an axiom, al-yaqinu la yazalu bishak, that anything of certainty, meaning the fact that you have wudu, it does not go away by doubt, that do I have wudu or do I not have wudu? So anybody that has waswasas, they need to give themselves, meaning speaking to themselves, that they have certain proof that this is they don't have wudu anymore. That's the only way. So whether it's in taharat or whether it's any aspect of the wudu. Okay, so let me read this really quick. If someone has a continuous issue, for them to be excused, does their specific issue have to continue for the whole period of time of prayer, or happens for a while during the time period of prayer, but not for the whole duration? So again, to be established, it should be for almost 99.9% of the time. Once it's established, your issue can even come up once, and you'll be considered as a chronic excused person. And if a time period comes where it does not happen, then you are no longer established as a chronic person. So the general rule, so the question is, moisturizer, powder, lotion, do these things have to be removed before making wudu, or is it a barrier preventing the water? I can't answer for all of those, but the general rule is, if any of the makeup, any of the moisturizers, powders, sunscreens, any of those are water resistant, right? So there's two words they'll have on the labels, either water resistant or waterproof. Both of them sometimes are interchangeable, but the technical term is that one is that does not allow water to go through, and the other allows water to go through, but does not get dissolved by water, meaning does not erase away with water. So you would have to check the packaging, you would have to check your own products to make sure that you know what level of water resistance it is. Yes, so the question was, if a person has urine issues, they did wudu and drops fall, and they continue to do salah and change and make wudu. Yes, again, they clean themselves and then they continue making salah. Can one excused person lead non-excused person? No. An excused person cannot lead a non-excused person. They cannot be imam. Because, you know, logically, they're at a higher level of tahara. Does having Vaseline allow you to make wudu? Not sure. Got Vaseline, does it prevent water or no?
Yeah, it's like a jelly.
Yeah. So if it blocks the skin from receiving any of the water, you will not be able to use it.
For some time.
Their body. Vaseline does like absorb into the skin after like some time. While you freshly apply the blocks.
Right. So again, same general rule that if you can read the packaging and see what type and sort, if it allows water to go through, it's permissible. If it does not and it prevents it and resistant to it, then you cannot. Something like mascara, if it's not waterproof, do you have to remove it for wudu? If it's not waterproof, then it should be good because that will allow water to go through. If a person starts bleeding from a wound at Isha time, can they pray Isha before going to sleep out of the fear that they won't be able to wake up before Fajr prayer? And are they constantly bleeding? If they're constantly bleeding, they should wait till the blood is done and put a bandage or something so you can wrap it up, and then you can, even if it's bleeding under the bandage, it's fine. You know, so let's say at Isha time, it's big, whatever bandage, you put it up, even if you're bleeding through it, it's fine. You can pray your prayer and you can wipe over that area. Remember, this excused rulings, they're talking about chronic illness. Chronic illness means it keeps coming over and over, not a one-time issue. Meaning, let's say you cut yourself or your nose is bleeding or something. That's a one-time thing. Something that comes over and over daily, somebody's facing with it, you know, they're moving, but they don't even know that they let out some gas. That's the chronic issues. So if a person has a one-time issue, it's not the same, right? Can an excused person lead excused people? Yes, they can. All right, inshallah. So homework is to go over the notes, go over the notes that you wrote, lecture slides, and then also submit them. And then finish. I'm gonna be sending out a bigger reading assignment this time. And inshallah, I'm gonna write directions on exactly how I want you guys to read it. So inshallah, look forward to that, inshallah, and make sure you practice. And I'll be also uploading a quiz, inshallah.
Question for the one. So
Yeah.
it's long. I do it if I type it.
Listen. No, say it.
So when you treat the water with chemical, it smells.
Oh, right. So the question was, is water that has chlorine and other treatment chemicals in it, can you make wudu with them? So the general rule is that if a person, if the water changes in its taste, color, or smell when other liquids are dropped in, or if solids are dropped in, then the thinness, fluidity, and the fact that it can quench a person's thirst, if majority of those factors change in the water, then a person should not be able to make wudu. So in chlorine water, a person, I'll look it up. So their smell. Is there color in chlorine? No, right?
No.
There's no chlorine color.
Taste, you cannot drink that if the chlorine is more than the required amount. So they have a formula that this much water, this much tablet you need to put in.
So for each amount of water, they tell you how much chlorine to put in. And then what if you go over, then the taste, the smell comes up.
It's going to be more, and it's.
And if you
it's
put,
gonna be less.
so if you put the recommended amount, is there smell or no?
There is a smell.
There is a smell, right? Yeah.
It even removes the bad odor. So if the water is smelling bad because of fungi or algae, it removes that odor and brings the chlorine odor, which is more pleasant than the algae flow odor.
Inshallah, I will check up this question and I'll let you guys know.
There was one more. There is a distillation process. So if there's a filthy water and you distill it, the steam comes on top, and you take that steam out.
That's fine. Yeah. So the question was on distilled water. Is it permissible? You're boiling water and you're collecting the steam. That's going to be fine.
Just like desalination.
Just to get exactly. And then snow and ice, all of those. Does hair gel or pomade prevent wudu? So if hair gel prevents water, see, all these products I can't tell you because there's so many different products out there. I can't give you a general ruling. That's why I keep referring back to the rule, which is look at the product, look at the back of it. If it prevents water to go seep through in any sort of makeup product, cosmetic things, then it will be not allowed to make wudu through it. And if it does, then you're good. You can use it and you can have it. Gel.
Henna.
Henna, yeah. Henna is fine.
It allows.
Yeah.
So wudu can be done, but not the ghusl.
So you're putting on the hair, right? Or the hands?
Okay.
Hair. And it's in the beginning stages with the crust. Meaning, like, is it just dyed in, or are you saying it's you just applied it?
What is that? You apply it.
So right after you apply it, you're saying, then making ghusl, or
No, then making wudu.
then making ghusl. Right after you have the
Right after, maybe it dries up a little bit, and then you want to make masa on it. It's masa valid.
no, the water needs to touch the hair for muscle.
The skin is already wet. Don't ask that question in exam.
I'll look it up again. So one of the brothers, they were, what did he write? These days, henna comes with a lot of chemicals. The comment that help people is that silicone blocks the water, so the ingredients ending in one in. So yeah, inshallah, I will look up the water for chlorine and anything that is similar to that, inshallah. We will inshallah meet on Thursday and continue from there, inshallah. Subhanallah, because we lazim them by Assalamu alaikum.
If we have